Hello and welcome to the Startups of London podcast. I'm your host Ozan and the founder of Startups of London. Today I'm joined by Tom Wordie, co-founder and head of marketing for AndCo.life. So it is AndCo.life. Welcome, Tom.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here. We were actually having just a moment ago having a chat with Tom talking about the realities of the startup world, the glamour versus the reality. So Tom, let me just start by asking, what is it that people really misunderstand about the world of startups? What's the common misconception that you've ran across?
Yeah, I think especially over here in the UK, I think the image that people think of when they think of startups, they think of Silicon Valley and networking and making a lot of money, but actually there's a huge amount of hard graft and hard work that goes into building something, and I think a lot of people also forget how long it takes to build something as successful as some of the biggest, bigger companies that obviously all started off as startups back in the day. People forget that Airbnb is sort of, over a decade old now. So yeah, there's a huge amount of, I think, misconception that sort of working in a startup brings. But at the same time, it can be a great lifestyle. It can be terrible. There's a huge amount of up and downs. The ups are amazing. The downs are pretty terrible. It's a bit of a roller coaster ride, but it's, at AndCo, we always talk about, it's just one of those days, or it's just one of those weeks where things just aren't aligning or going well. And I think it's just about plugging on and cracking on with it and trying to make the most of what you have. And it is tough, especially as founders. It's difficult to keep the team motivated when actually in yourself you're feeling pretty stressed and stretched in terms of what you can achieve. So I think that's probably the biggest sort of takeaway that I've had from this experience, is that, you do have to keep face in terms of keeping the employees as motivated as possible and not letting whatever you're feeling at the time rub off on them. And so it's important to balance, I think, the lows and the highs, and obviously on the highs not going overboard, because, it's then quite difficult to get back up to that level and show that off to the employees.
Well said. That's definitely one of the most difficult things about being an entrepreneur, those highs and lows and the valleys in between them. It takes a lot of psychological and existential energy, I would say, to keep yourself on balance and on target. How do you think, and I think you need a huge amount of optimism. This is what I call the entrepreneur's dilemma. On the one hand, you need to be hyper optimistic, unshaken belief that you are in the right path, otherwise it's difficult to motivate yourself. But on the other hand, you need to be open to the possibility that you're always wrong, and you have to keep these two realities coexisting in the same brain at the same time. And how do you think this interacts with the culture we have in terms of an element of skepticism and an element of cynicism versus the US culture of unbridled optimism and the sky is the limit way of thinking? What type of a difference do you think it makes in the startup ecosystem, if I might ask?
Yeah, I think I think most importantly, it's about keeping realistic. You obviously have to believe in the idea that you've been working on for so long, and you constantly find yourself convincing other people that it's the same. It's the same for them. But yeah, I think it's just about being realistic about what you're trying to achieve, and also not making a mountain out of a molehill. I think it's important to take these things a step at a time, and delivering on what you're promising rather than over promising constantly. And also to yourself, you have to look inwards and think, right, what can we as a team actually achieve here? But yeah, we've sort of noticed this actually in some of the rounds of funding that we're doing, that there is definitely a level of skepticism within even investors. If we were raising money in the US, we'd be hitting investment rounds much quicker than we do over here. That's for sure.
A bigger certainty required, more safety, security, certainty. Is that the difference, or is it something else?
I think there probably is an element of that, but also the kind of what we're seeing over here, and actually, whether people believe in you or not, it keeps you pretty grounded, and it makes you understand that, you know, it is really hard work, and not everyone is going to have the same outlook on startups as you do, or on your idea as you do. And it's important to kind of step back and realize that as well, I think, rather than kind of plowing on and thinking that, you know, what you're doing is correct. You have to have the ability to step back and think, well, actually, this probably doesn't work, or, you know, why is this not working, and what can we do about it, rather than blindly in your own sort of faith in what you're doing going forward, and not thinking about whether it's right or not. I think a lot of startups do that over here, especially, and probably, you know, the US as well. The most important, and actually what we were so lucky about with the pandemic was that it actually gave us an opportunity to really stop and think and strategize about the future, and, you know, what hasn't worked in the past, and should we really just, you know, forget about that, or should we remodel it? Should we rethink what we're doing? So I think that, the most important thing is keeping relatively realistic and not being too bullish about your own ideas constantly. You obviously have to have that, and you have to get through various different barriers with that bullishness, but at the same time, you have to be able to step back and think that, you know, you're not the only person that's correct in this situation.
You need to believe in your strengths, at the same time be in peace with the reality. You don't know everything, so be open to, in a way, the way I make peace of these two realities is, you need to believe you're strong, but you also need to believe your strength comes from your openness to learning. So it's kind of like a full loop, and that makes you, I think, really strong as an entrepreneur. That way of thinking. I'm strong, but I'm strong through my openness to learning and experiencing and being able to take new things in. I have a lot of questions about this, but before we go further, I think it would be great to talk about AndCo.life and what kind of a company it is, how long it's been in operation for, what's your role there, and the big journey, the big highlights of that journey so far. If you would love to hear about it.
Yeah, cool. So I'll give you a bit of background about how we started. So I met Sanj, who's founder and CEO, at a previous startup that we both worked at. It was called Yubble. That one sadly didn't work out, but it meant that we then started working on various different kind of platform ideas and marketplaces. And we were actually working from kind of various different coffee shops at the time, trying to get out of the house. And this was about 5.5 years ago. And we started looking at what was out there for people freelancing, working for themselves, working remotely, because it was, it's happening a lot now, but it was certainly happening back in that time as well. Mm-hmm. And the idea really came about when Sanjay's wife, Nicole, who works in property renovations, and she has a lot of client meetings but can't have them on site because of health and safety reasons, etc.
Got it.
She ended up having them in lots of different kind of smaller coffee shops, and really found that they just weren't great places to hold a meeting, especially with some of the clients that she was working with. And she was walking home one day and started walking past all these empty pubs, bars, restaurants and hotels, and came back and said, why aren't we working from them during the day? Because they're just sitting empty. So we started looking at all these different hospitality venues, and also looking at the co-working space as a whole. And at the time, there were, the WeWorks of the world, the office groups, they were popping up on every single street corner. So we started looking around at what they were doing to kind of attract this new wave of people working remotely, and found that essentially what they were doing was taking very corporate office buildings and making them look quite cool. They were changing up the interiors. They were giving out free beer, free Prosecco, free pastries in the morning, that kind of stuff. But really, they were kind of mimicking the hospitality space, and more so with the hotels as well. If you walk into a communal space of most of the co-working spaces that we know of today, they look and feel almost identical to a hotel lobby, for example. So we couldn't quite get our heads around why people were spending £400, £500, £600, £700 sometimes on a co-working space, when actually we've got all these venues that exist all around us already, and we don't have to build anything new. We don't have to change up anything. These spaces were already there.
I remember. I'll interrupt you for a second here.
Yeah.
I joining an Airbnb experience. I think it was called an event where basically somebody does a tour of the startup ecosystem in London. Anthony was the guy's name. He was, I think, working with Weira, the Telefonica accelerator, and he was amazing actually. He was doing this tour. I joined him with a few people, and we basically visited a few places. There was, I think, the Hoxton's Hotel, a few others as well, and they are providing basically free space, free co-working space. And this was back in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
And immediately you can tell, okay, the co-working space model is going to be challenged, and there is certainly something brewing up here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what was already happening is, and you quite rightly say, is that, the Hoxton, the Ace Hotels of the world, they were already doing this, and people were, they basically worked out that if they put in really fast Wi-Fi into their lobby space, people would turn up. And then they had food and drink, which they could then sell them, and they were making a lot of money doing that. So what AndCo does is it really just formalizes that behavior. We basically have built a platform that connects the two sides of the marketplace. On the one hand, you've got the people working remotely, obviously our members who pay £20 a month or £149 for the year to have access to all these venues. Or and on the other side of the platform, you have the venues themselves. So these hotels that have spare capacity during the day, they have big lobby spaces, which are pretty much sitting empty. So we kind of going back to when we were first doing the research, we started speaking to a lot of these hospitality venues, and predominantly at the time they were pubs, bars and restaurants. We've actually kind of moved away from that model slightly, and we're working with hotels now.
Okay.
But they were basically all saying that they were, throughout the week, they were dead. They were empty. They made like 75-80% of their revenue on a Thursday, Friday and Saturday night. But for the rest of the time, they were just sitting empty, and they had staff walking around doing nothing, basically. So we started...
It's definitely a good problem to tackle from a startup perspective, because there is pain, there is money, there is unutilized capacity, just like this was a core principle back in the day, right? With the Ubers, like there is capacity that's sitting idle, and they find a technological solution to incorporate that without creating new cars or new drivers. You have created new value. So there's some kind of a similar dynamic in your case, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way we always looked at it was about speed. So how quickly can you book somewhere that's close to you? So it was about getting as many venues on as possible, that we had the kind of locality of the spaces as well. It was about price. So, looking what was out there in the market, people were spending hundreds of pounds a month on an office space or a co-working space. And we wanted to just completely disrupt the market. And then it was about convenience as well. So having, the choice and the flexibility to be able to go and work from where you want to work from, rather than having to commute into central London or stay at home. It was about giving that kind of third option, and really sort of putting the onus back on the members to where they want to work from. There isn't a crowded coffee shop. It isn't working from your kitchen table at home. But it doesn't also mean that you have to go into the office, because as we all know, the 9 to 5 has changed a lot. It's, there's not as many people going to the offices anymore. Remote work has really taken off obviously over the last kind of 2.5 years. It's been catapulted forward 20 years. And we were just formalizing a behavior that already exists, but also doing it in a way that there is a bit of infrastructure involved, rather than corporate saying, great, our employees can have the flexibility they want. They can go and work from wherever they like. Some people don't like working from home, but also, a local coffee shop might not be the best environment to work from. So what we go and do is we go and put in our own AndCo Wi-Fi into all of the venues. It's completely secure. It's high speed. And it means that they've got a consistent login experience across all the different venues that we have.
Okay, that's something I was curious, because you ask for £20 a month, which I think is a good deal, and you can work from anywhere you want, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, and I'm reading from your website, 400 plus locations. Book your desk or meeting room and settle into a workspace made for you. And I was playing with the question in my head, okay, how is this different than me just going into a hotel or a coffee shop and getting a table for myself? And like, this is one point where it is different than a standard experience. You get the Wi-Fi for for AndCo, and do you use the locations infrastructure for that, or like how does that work?
Yeah, so we kind of piggyback off the existing lines that are already in there. So we don't go and put in any kind of, Wi-Fi cabling or anything like that. Yeah. We basically have worked out how we can still go and put in our own hardware, and it will just segregate a network for our members, basically. So we know that there are going to be, 10, 20, 30 desks in that space, and we can adjust the Wi-Fi accordingly to make sure that we've got enough bandwidth for each member coming in.
But it's a great convenience because you don't have to ask for Wi-Fi password every time you go there, or worry about security. Yeah,
you have your own AndCo login, so you have your username and password, and that is exactly the same across all the different sites that we have on the platform. And for the venue side, it's great as well because it's also how we can track bookings. So we know that if someone actually hasn't turned up to their desk booking, within 15 minutes, we can then make that desk available to the next member on the platform. So from a venue perspective, it's great because you don't have someone booking out, 10 desks in your space and then not turning up. We know exactly if they haven't or have turned up because they've connected to the Wi-Fi. And it's completely secure. So a lot of the corporates and SMEs that we have signing up now, a lot of them will have certain security factors where they're not allowed to access open networks. So if they were to go and work in the hotel lobby themselves, they just wouldn't be able to access the Wi-Fi there. So we've got that kind of added layer of security, which means that corporates can use us. And then going back to your question about, because we get this a lot, obviously, where people say, I can go and work in any of these places for free. But it's all about reliability, and it's knowing that you've got somewhere that's booked and reserved for you, rather than spending the time walking around trying to find the best place where you can, you've got Wi-Fi and a strong Wi-Fi, secure Wi-Fi, and a place to sit and work. We all know that space is hard to come by in central London. And you've only got to look at places like the Hoxton and the Ace that have, it's a complete race to get there in the morning. People would go and, at 8 a.m. they'd be knocking the door down, practically trying to sit down and work and find themselves a place.
Grab a good place.
Exactly.
But it's the Wi-Fi, the certainty of knowing you have a space available.
Yeah.
What else would be different than the walk-in experience of that place, for example?
Yeah, so we have quite a lot of, we put a lot of stress on community. What we found in doing a lot of the research, especially within the freelancer community, obviously mental health is a real issue, especially if you're working for yourself. You can start to feel very isolated. So for us, it's about getting people back into the spaces. It's about meeting other people that are in a similar setup to you. We have a feature in the app where you will see who else is working in the same space as you. So we act as a bit of an icebreaker to say, look, this is Johnny. He's a graphic designer. He'll be able to help you out with X, Y, and Z. So it's really a way of kind of building community as well. And for freelancers, especially, or people running their own little business, it's about, finding potentially new customers or someone that could give you very quick feedback on your latest designs or whatever it might be. So that's obviously for us, it's really important having that community aspect to it.
This kind of makes me feel nostalgic, I'll admit. In 2018 and before the pandemic, definitely, I was mentor / member of a few co-working spaces. One of them was called Catch 22.
Yeah,
lovely people there. I was going there frequently. A few other places as well. And now with this work from home transition, I think I've missed. I think I've missed it. Going back, it feels like a good idea now because meeting and interacting with people always is nice. But also you need to feel safe, right? I think that's the issue. If you're spending 5 minutes making a decision, is it safe enough to go out? Like, will I get a virus or so? Then it turns into this hassle, and you just say, "I'll just rather stay at home." But it's. I think this period showed us the value of getting out of your own house in a way. Well, like you are interacting with a lot of people within your company that are using your spaces, etc. So what's your observation about this? How do you think the general tide, the general the zeitgeist is changing in terms of people's willingness to use public spaces day in day out.
Yeah, so I think what's happened is that people have become sort of very they have a heightened awareness of their space that they have available to them. So what we've found definitely kind of in between the two, the various lockdowns that we had, is that the main sort of feeling was that people just wanted to get out of their own house. They'd spent months on end staring at the same four walls. A lot of the people that we initially had working with us were in the creative industries. So having kind of inputs and outputs into your life was really important. And that's why a lot of people ended up using AndCos, because they could use a different location every single day. Now, I think, we're definitely, as a brand, which we're trying to position ourselves as not anti-office or anti-working from home. It merely is just another alternative to those things, and something that can be used as a great kind of add-on to it as well. We have quite a lot of corporates that have their own office space, but they might not want to get the team together. They might not want to get the team to go there every day. So they have this option for their employees to go and work from AndCo locations. It's been an interesting journey for us, because our demographic has really kind of broadened out from initially this being a very sort of individual use platform for freelancers, has now become much more team orientated as well. So we've seen a lot of SMEs and corporates that are just scaling back on office space. They get rid of their meeting rooms, but they need somewhere for their employees to get back into the real life together. Because as you've sort of touched on, the most important thing is that human interaction and kind of, making sure that, you're keeping sane by speaking to people that isn't necessarily on a Zoom call or a Google Hangout or whatever it might be. But yeah, and going back to your safety question, definitely it's something that we were seeing just after the lockdowns, is that they were still hesitant to come back into central or into a location that wasn't their home. But it feels like that's lifted now pretty significantly. And the beauty of working with the hotels is that they have, they have cleaning departments, and they all had to comply to COVID regulations and all the rest of it. So in truth, the hotels are some of the most safe places you could be.
Well, what do you think works best for people in terms of, or what is the model people use most frequently in terms of dividing up their time? Perhaps it's not the best way of phrasing this question now that I think of it, but what I'm basically trying to say is, what do you see? Do you see people who come and work in your co-working spaces 5 days a week? Is it just people thinking like, okay, change of scenery is what I need, so one day a week I'll work from a place like this, and the rest I'll spend working from home? Also, how does that mix go in your experience?
Yeah, so when we first launched, the type of booking behavior that we were seeing was that it was very, very much kind of on the go booking. So people would have a meeting across town and they didn't want to go back home, or they didn't want to go back to their office, so they would find an AndCo location for a few hours, and it would be probably a new location that they'd never been to, but it was, again, just that reliability of knowing that you've got somewhere that you've booked. And the average booking duration was somewhere between kind of 2.5 to 3.5 hours. So it was a relatively short booking. What we've seen since the pandemic is that we have people just repeat booking every single day in the same venue that is probably relatively close to their house. And they will book 9 till 5, and they use it as an office space, essentially. So the average booking duration across the platform has gone from that sort of 2.5 to 3.5 hour mark to, upwards of 6 hours, which has been the biggest shift that we've seen. And this is teams coming together. This is people just wanting to get out of their own house. We have another sort of group of bookers per se, that will book on average probably twice a week. And they will come back normally to the same venue, but they might go and try out a couple of new venues depending on where their meetings are that day. But they will do, 1 to 2 days a week outside of the office or outside of the home. And that's why, going back to kind of our positioning, we don't want to alienate people that go to the office or work from home, because, really this platform could be for anyone that needs some space to work from. So it's basically the perfect supplement to either of those two, depending on what kind of work you do. yeah, those have been that's the biggest trends in booking that we picked up anyway.
As a company, do you have any motivation to gather people and give them a way to communicate? This might be live events, it might be a Slack channel, or anything at all. Or do you see
Yeah.
these transactions as individual? And do you have the motivation to bring people together? Is there anything you do in that regard?
Yeah, so community is massive for us, especially within the members who are freelancers.
Do you have like a Discord or Slack or some kind of a
yeah.
chat? Yeah.
So what we did literally the first day of lockdown, because we wanted to continue to add value, and obviously on the first day of lockdown, we had to close off all the venues. Our revenue went down to zero overnight because we had to pause everyone's subscriptions.
Tough.
It was a scary moment.
Well done. You're now a veteran soldier that made it through. So
yeah, I know, touch wood, fingers crossed. So what we did was we set up a Slack channel and just pinged it out on an email to all of our members to say, look, we're going to be in here and it's a tough time and we don't know what's going to happen, but if people want to chat, then please come and join. And suddenly within 10 minutes we had a few hundred people in there, and I was like, oh god, we haven't actually got a plan for this at all. What are we going to do? And then we just started talking to people and kind of getting out there and seeing what people were looking for. So we started doing a load of kind of discounts on and brand partnerships for brands or services that we thought our community might benefit from, and did sort of weekly Zooms with the community. We did weekly sort of workshops and stuff like that from some of the brand partners that we were working with. And that was really also an extension of what we were doing pre-pandemic in the venues. We used to run loads of workshops on a weekly basis, mainly community-led as well. So people from the community could kind of show off what their services were and talk about what their experience is. So we even had things like iPhone photography workshops, like how to get the most out of your iPhone because you can't afford to pay someone to come and do a big photo shoot or whatever. So there were lots of things that we do in that regard, and it's a really nice opportunity for us to introduce new venues that are joining the platform to the community. Getting people through that front door and exposing them to the space is obviously really important. So marrying that up with a workshop or with an event or a product launch or whatever it might be is the perfect way to do it.
We talk about the pandemic accelerating how we work. In terms of the transition to work from home, the devices that we use. But at the same time, I think it did another good thing, a silver lining perhaps. It showed us the limit of how individual we can be in terms of how we spend our day to day. The point where it stops making sense and the point where we need other people for inspiration, for socializing, for asking questions. Gossip, like the gossip is always an underappreciated and misunderstood way of learning about any ecosystem, right? So we really, I think, realized the value of these, but there's still, I think, a long way to go. But my final question to you, as we are running out of time, is again a time-related question, but perhaps with a different twist. I've spoken with a lot of entrepreneurs in different stages in their lives. And what I found out was that we usually have a habit of underestimating how much of time and also hard work and effort, but let's think of the time frame. Building a startup and making it successful takes. What has been your personal experience with this? And I'm asking this specifically with the fact that your AndCo.life has been going on for a strong 6 years now. How were those years different than each other, and what do you think about this general understanding in the, let's say, marketplace, in the ecosystem, about how long it takes to build a successful startup? Where do you agree, where do you disagree? I would love to hear your personal perspective on this, Tom.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic of conversation, because I think what happens is that everyone sees these apparent overnight successes, but actually, they just don't exist. There's a huge amount of time and effort that goes into getting to that point, and I think that's probably what surprises people the most, is how old actually some of the companies are, that seem to suddenly just appear out of nowhere, and it's the latest big startup and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, almost the most difficult years are the ones when you're launching the product and it's out there and it's for the world to kind of scrutinize. You're sort of the safety blanket of being in beta and not having quite launched yet is quite nice, but it's also absolutely terrifying knowing that you're going to be launching something out in the world and you have no idea of how people are going to pick it up and how they use it, and etc. But it's also, as scary as it is, it's the time when you spend the most amount of time learning and figuring out what is the right way to use this and how are people using it and what can we change, what can we adapt. But yeah, I mean, the reality is it's a huge amount of time and effort, but the reason why we do this is because you hopefully reap the benefits once it all comes to a head and comes to fruition. But yeah, definitely the first few years are really tough, but they're also super exciting. You've got this sort of idea in your head, you want to materialize it, you want to bring it out to the world and for people to use it. And some of the most exciting times for me is when you end up going to some of the venues and you start talking to the members, or you see people checking into the venues themselves, and it's like, we built that, we made that from scratch, and that's really exciting. But and it goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, about these highs and lows. The highs are amazing, the lows are awful, but it's about riding them at the right time and making sure that you're not losing control on both sides, I think.
That's, I think, a brilliant way of putting it. If we could even say, the more extreme the highs and the lows are, the bigger desire one has to share it with the people around, is what I can gather from my knowledge in human psychology. And
yeah, well, exactly. And
that's what makes what you're doing valuable, right?
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where I always talk about this to people that I meet when you meet your friends or you meet new people at parties and whatever, and you end up spending your life talking about the startup that you're working with. And I think it's important in that respect as well, just to, as we kept using the word realistic earlier, I think you has to be realistic in what you're in the amount that your mind and your body can take when it comes to hammering home the same thing over and over again. So it's important to take a step back and for your own body and mind, take a bit of time and don't stress about it too much. It's very easy to get sucked into what other people think of you, but realistically, are they really thinking about you? Probably not. They've got a lot of other things to think about. So it's really important to just
thinking about what others are thinking about them.
Exactly. So it's important just to be realistic. I think that's probably my buzzword for the day. Yeah.
Thank you for all the comments. I wish you the best with the business. Hopefully we'll see you in another 6 years, maybe sooner. Joking aside, this whole dream and ideal of hyper-scaling, hyper-growth startups that are based on getting the next round of investment, okay, that's all good and fine, and it works for some companies, and I think it's even necessary in some industries where you need extreme disruption and really quickly. But that is definitely not a model, a go-to model, a default model for all types of startups. And I think that's the exact moment in time in history about startups that we are currently. That's what people are discovering. Hopefully this podcast has served some of our audience out there to take another look into what they assume about startups and how it should grow. And this was AndCo.life and Tom Wordie, their co-founder, head of marketing. Thank you very much for joining our chat, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see you.